Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, we're going to start translating because it's getting a little bit long. We have a quotation that talks about faith and says faith is the preliminary, like a mother. It generates and then increases all qualities. So we're talking about how important it is to generate all the qualities. Here, in the context of the Lam Rim, all the qualities of listening, reflecting, meditating, practicing the Lam Rim. For all of those things, it's very important to have faith. And that faith has to be stable. If faith is stable, then all the virtuous qualities, all the qualities that we value, will gradually develop. And in this way, we can reach the all-omniscient state of Buddhahood. So we will be able to generate all the qualities that come from practicing the path shared with the individual of the small scope, all the qualities that come from the practice of the path shared with the middle scope, all the qualities that come with the practice of the great scope, developing bodhicitta, progressing along the 5 paths and the 10 grounds. All of those things are built upon faith. To give you an example, if you want to build a house, the very first step that you have to do is to secure land, but you want to buy land in a place where the land is very stable. You don't want to buy land somewhere where there is erosion or anything like this. If you can secure a stable and firm land, then you can build with confidence on top of that. So here in particular, we are practitioners of the Lam Rim, so we're talking about faith in the Mahayana. If you have faith in the Mahayana, it means you will have great interest in reading and studying and eventually practicing all the Mahayana sutras and treatises. So first of all, you will rely on a teacher. And by relying on the teacher, due to your great interest in the Mahayana sutras, Mahayana practices, and so forth, you will develop along the path and progress with all your qualities increasing exponentially until you reach the state of omniscience. Why will you have this progress? You will have this progress because due to your faith, you will have great interest in the Mahayana. So we talk about reaching the future result, and the future result is the resultant state of Buddhahood that comes with the establishment of the 4 bodies, which is the form body, the enjoyment body, the Dhamma body, and the nature body. So in order to obtain all this in the future, it's very important to have faith. There are 3 different types of faith. The first one is called the lucid or the clear faith. The second one is called the faith of belief. And the third one is the aspirational faith. So the first one, the lucid faith, to give you an example, Geshe was saying, imagine that we do have people like this who come into the Dhamma center. They do not know things in great detail. So if you were to ask them, how is the Buddha, the Dhamma jewel, the Sangha jewel, how do they protect us and so forth, what qualities they have, maybe they won't be able to give you that technical explanation. However, in general, these are people who are inclined to recite mantras. Also, in terms of their physical behavior, when they come into the Gompa, they see the statues of the Buddhas or the images of the Buddhas, and you see the immediate response is to put the palm of the hands together, to lower the head, to prostrate, and so forth. So physically and verbally, they carry out those let's say, typical Buddhist activities, right? But they don't have necessarily the reasoning for solid reasoning for explaining all that. Nevertheless, what makes them delight in meeting the statues, what makes them prostrate or venerate the statues just at first sight, is that first type of faith, which is the lucid faith. They do not have the solid reasoning, but they have interest, and that brings that delight in their mind. So that is one type of faith. The second type of faith is the faith of belief. In order to have the faith of belief, you must have reflected upon reasoning, and you must have some solid reasoning. So you must have proven things to yourself, right? So, for example, how does the Buddha protect us? How does the Dharma protect us? How does the Sangha what makes the Sangha to be a jewel, and so forth? So you must have seen the reason behind those things. So really, why does the Buddha protect us? Why has the Buddha become the protector of all living beings? He has become that protecting entity because he strived over a very long time, over 3 countless great eons, to amass the 2 types of accumulation. So this took quite a lot of effort. It was not for a short period, and it was not easy. The main point of the training was to subdue the mind. And when we say to subdue the mind, we have to understand that we have different types of consciousness that we need to deal with. Obviously, we have sense awareness, such as the eye awareness, the ear awareness, the nose awareness, the tongue awareness, tactile awareness, that can constantly give us a lot of information about different visual forms or sounds or smells and taste and tactile objects and so forth. However, although these types of awareness give us very detailed information, these are not the type of awareness that can help us go and reach the state of Buddhahood. So they don't benefit us in terms of our path to enlightenment. What benefits us there is mental awareness, not sense awareness. So it is this mental awareness that needs to be purified. We need to remove all afflictions from this awareness with great effort by, first of all, relying on a teacher, and then continuing from the effort from our part to study and meditate according to the practices of the 3 scopes in the Lam Rim, and continue on that path until we reach the state of Buddhahood. So what is interesting here, we talk about mental awareness. So this refers to what we do with our mind. So many times we see people carrying out the external, let's say, manifestations or activities of the Buddhist faith. So you might have a person, it could be yourself, prostrating or saying, I go for refuge and things like this. Although verbally and physically we might be doing those things or saying those things, the real question is, what is our mind doing? What is mental consciousness doing at that time? Other people will not know. Other people cannot read your mind. Of course, the Buddha, who is an omniscient being, fully understands what is happening in your mind at the very time that you are prostrating, at the very moment where you say, I'll go for refuge. But the other person who knows is you yourself. We are our own teacher, if you want. And we know very well, if we stop and think, we will recognize what our mind is doing. So I could be prostrating, I could be putting my hands together and going for refuge. But why am I doing this? Am I doing it because I think other people should see me prostrating? Is this all about a show? Is this all about being under the influence of the 8 worldly concerns? Why am I doing those things? Or what am I thinking whilst I'm prostrating, and so forth? So we've talked about the first and the second type of faith. The third type of faith is aspirational faith. So aspirational faith has to do with the things that we aspire to reach in the future. So we say that in the future, based on my practice, I must obtain Buddhahood, right? So there are no if and buts and maybes. There should be no doubt here. Like 100%, this is my goal. This is what I want, and this is what I will obtain in the future. So this is aspirational faith, isn't it? It's not something that is achievable in a few months. If it was that easy, the world would be full of Buddhas, but they're very rare, actually. But nevertheless, we have to set this as the goal and have the firm belief that this is what we will achieve in the future. In terms of individual sentient beings, when we describe cyclic existence, we say that it might be beginningless. However, there is an end to it. When you say it is beginningless, it means you don't know where this consciousness, the present consciousness, has come from. Maybe it goes back to the previous life and the life before that and the life before that, and it's endless. You can regress in the past, endless, but you cannot see the beginning. So it is beginningless. However, we say in the future, will there be an end? And to that we say, yes, there will be an end, because actually all sentient beings will reach the state of Buddhahood. So there will be an end for individuals within samsara. Okay, so it's okay. So this should not be mere words, right? I will become a Buddha in the future, my future Buddhahood, and so forth. This is something that we must really believe. To be honest, sometimes doubt arises, like what is that state of Buddhahood? I've never met a Buddha. Yes, Buddha Shakyamuni became enlightened and he came into this world. He manifested enlightenment in this world, but we were not around at that time. We did not meet the Buddha. And at that time, the Buddha benefited thousands and thousands of beings, but we missed out because we were not there. So we don't actually have a concrete example of Buddhahood. Sometimes the doubt arises. However, we know that in an era, there are 1,000 Buddhas that will come into this world. So far, the first 4 Buddhas have come into the world. Buddha Shakyamuni is the 4th Buddha. And after that, there will be the 5th Buddha, which is Buddha Maitreya. So sometimes the texts refer to this when the sun is setting and the full moon will arise. So the sun refers to the enlightenment of Buddha Shakyamuni. There will come an end to the era of Buddha Shakyamuni. And when that happens, the next Buddha, who is the 5th Buddha, Buddha Maitreya, will come into this world. So it will be like the full moon rising. So how will Buddha Maitreya come into this world? At present, he is the regent who abides at Tushita, but he will come when the time is ready. He will come into this world. He will manifest enlightenment in Bodh Gaya and turn the wheel of Dharma and manifest the 4 bodies and so forth. Also, it is said that at the time of Buddha Shakyamuni, there will be 500 Buddhas, 500 beings will manifest enlightenment. So there must be, 500 Buddhas somewhere scattered around. We don't necessarily recognize them. Okay. But the next Buddha that will come is Buddha Maitreya. Okay. So this, although doubt sometimes arises, how will I become a Buddha? Nevertheless, we can see that this type of faith can be generated. We can see this through 2 types of example. One example is the example of a businessman who has a good, profitable year. And when they calculate the profit of this year, they say, oh, all right, on the basis of what I have achieved this year, I have confidence that next year also I can generate similar, if not more, profit than what I did this year. Or you can see the parents who might have a very young child, and the parents from the very beginning are adamant that they will educate that kid, and they are planning the education. Now, that kid has not even reached the kindergarten, right? But the parents have the very strong motivation to educate the kid. And then you see, if that is the intention of the parents, eventually in the future, that kid is very well educated. So the early plant or the early aspiration of the parents actually comes into fruition. So this is what we're referring to as aspirational faith. Okay, so it's very important to have faith, and the lack of faith actually deprives us of any real Dharma practice and any qualities. As the ornament of realization says, faith is like the root. Now, we know that faith is very important, but of course it has to be combined with enthusiastic effort from our part. Faith is not enough. There needs to be practice, there needs to be application in that. So, as we say, faith can be expressed in different ways. We can express faith with physical activities, with verbal activities, and with mental activities. So you see people doing recitations or praising, expressing, praise for the good qualities of the 3 jewels and so forth, or doing prostrations, circumambulations, things like that. All of these are expressions of faith. But the most important is faith that we have in the mind. So mental attitude of faith is very important. We always stress that for every activity we have 3 phases. We have the preliminary phase, which is the preparation. We have the actual carrying out of the activity, and then we have the conclusion. When when we're dealing with Dharma activities, with virtuous activities, we find that it is very difficult to get all three parts in good order or good condition. And certainly it's very difficult to maintain the correct type of faith during the whole process. When it comes to non-Dharma activities, actually we have no problem planning, preparation, carrying out the activity, concluding the activity. It all comes together very easily. But in terms of Dharma, it's very difficult to have the correct faith and the correct motivation when at the preliminary stages where we do the preparation is difficult. When we carry out the activity, such as in this case, the activity of listening to the Dharma, again, it's very difficult to do it in the proper way. To do it in the proper way, we must be free of the three faults and have the 6 types of attitudes. We will explain those things later on. And then at the end, we have to do a proper dedication prayer. So we find difficulty when, in the case of virtuous activities, to do all those things correctly. So it's very important to work on our intention, aspiration, our motivation at the very beginning. And we have to do this every day. We have to work on the motivation. And Geshe says, as much as I can, I will explain the motivation every time that we meet, because this is something which is quite important. And I hope that through my explanation, I can help remove misunderstandings and doubts. Every time you remove a misunderstanding, it means you develop a quality, a proper understanding in its place, right? So later on, there is no doubt, it is for certain that we will just accumulate good qualities one above the other, and we will reach the full potential that we have. Okay, so at this stage, it's very important that we have proper motivation and we do the proper prayers, aspirational prayers. So we mentioned here that we might be affected by the 8 worldly concerns, and this is something that we need to be aware of. So the 8 worldly concerns, or the 8 worldly dharmas, are really, we're very susceptible to this if we live in society. All right, because it is when you are living with other people, you need to have a good reputation. So reputation, having a good name, having a good reputation, the opinion of others actually matters and affects you in society. So for example, if people were to offer you things or talk about various pleasurable experiences and so forth, entertainment and so forth, and you keep saying, no, I don't like it, I don't want it, I don't want any of this. People, after a while, will start thinking, oh, this person is such a strange person. Actually, although you are trying to stop all of those things, which is a good thing in terms of Dharma, from the point of view of society, you will be criticized. Okay, Master Nagarjuna has actually spoken a lot about those 8 worldly concerns, has explained them, and has said that if you are a Dharma practitioner, you must oppose them. So when we talk about the 8 worldly concerns, for example, we have concern for praise. Okay, and if someone praises us, saying you're beautiful, or you are skilled, or you've done your job so well, or you are so clever, you are so intelligent, so any type of praise, when we hear that, the mind becomes very happy. We're very happy with this. If someone comes and criticizes us, oh, you are the worst person I've seen, and you lack talent, and you don't know how to do this, and you also don't look at your best today, and so on and so forth. Well, our minds are affected, right? So immediately we become unhappy. Another situation is, of course, when we have fame, a good reputation, like when people are praising us, that pleases us. But when we develop a bad reputation, this causes a lot of displeasure in the mind. Other situation is that when we are happy, we are very pleased. But whatever we consider to be happiness, it is under the influence of impermanence. And because afflictions, sooner or later, will arise in our mind, therefore, it's very difficult to maintain that state of happiness. It will turn into unhappiness. And when that happens, of course, we are very displeased. So like this, we're constantly preoccupied with or affected by the 8 worldly concerns. There was this story of Geshe Ben Gungel. So in the earlier part of his life, he was notorious. He killed people, he stole from people, he was like a bandit. But later on, he entered the Dharma, and he became a very dedicated practitioner. And he said that he was very aware of those 8 worldly concerns. So there was this particular day where one of his sponsors was coming to visit him. So the sponsor was coming to give him cheese and like yak meat and money and things like that, right? With a lot of offerings. The sponsor was coming loaded with offerings. So Geshe Ben Gungyang spent the whole day cleaning and preparing the place, and then he made the altar in his room very beautiful. So he put very nice water offerings, flowers, and whatever offerings. He polished everything, cleaned everything, and so forth. So by the time he finished cleaning and preparing and making everything so impressive and beautiful, he stopped and asked himself, so why have you been laboring the whole day? Why did you work so hard to prepare those offerings today? And of course, it was pretty obvious to him that he did it under the influence of the 8 worldly concerns. He really wanted to impress the sponsor. So he just reached down and he got there was some dust and ashes from the fireplace, and he just threw handfuls of this on the altar. So soon after that, the sponsor arrived, and he kind of looked at the altar, and there was like between the offerings and the statues, there was like heaps of dust and ashes and so forth. He had a good look at it, and he thought, why should you do that? And it occurred to him that, this is typical of Geshe Ben Gungyang. He is trying to oppose the 8 worldly concerns. He did something to impress me, realized, tried to reverse this, completely destroy this attitude. So we should try to be like Geshe Ben Gungyang, try to oppose the need to follow and satisfy those 8 worldly concerns. Okay, so we're talking about the 8 worldly concerns. So an example of this is practicing generosity, giving. Although internally your intention might be a stingy intention, you think, in this occasion, I must be seen to be generous. So I am going to make a donation. So you do this because you are wishing for recognition. You want others to think that you're a very generous person. However, if you really examine your mind or your intention internally, you see that you are anything but generous. It is very hard for us to totally abandon or walk away from the 8 worldly concerns. But this is definitely something that we must make an effort every day to oppose and minimize as much as possible. It is something which is emphasized very much in Lam Rim Chenmo, in all the Lam Rim texts, together with other subjects. So another subject that is talked a lot in the Lam Rim is impermanence. Impermanence and then death as part of the impermanence, idea of impermanence. So when we talk about impermanence, we talk about things changing momentarily. So within an instant, every moment, there is transformation, there is change. From our side, we grasp at things to be permanent. So we look, for example, at the house and we say, nothing's changed in the house. Nothing's changed in myself, because we have this grasping at permanence. But the truth is we change every day. Like there are wrinkles, the hair turned gray and so forth. We don't necessarily recognize those day by day, but those changes happen. So for example, whatever is the duration of your life, whatever is your lifespan, if you just look at today, now is like 4:00 in the afternoon, from the morning until now, all these hours are already gone, right? So this time has already passed. Now, there is a verse, again in the friendly letter by Master Nagarjuna, that talks about all those things that we grasp to, the 8 worldly concerns. So he says, the body is like a wilting flower. The beauty of the body is like a wilting flower. The praising words are like echo in an empty place, and the wealth is like drops of dew in the blade of grass. Okay, so definitely he's talking about this beauty or the youth of the body, which is something that we're very much attached to, and we want to maintain, and also we want to be praised for that beauty of the body. However, it says this is just like a flower. The flower might be fresh and beautiful right now, but in a day or two, it will wither, it will dry, it will turn black, yellow, and then black, and that's it. It's gone very quickly. So the beauty of the body is just like a withering flower. The second one is that all this fame and reputation and all this praise is just like an echo that reverberates in an empty place. And the wealth, let's say something, maybe your parents work very hard, or whatever money and possessions they accumulated, they pass down to the children, so you have inherited wealth. But again, it says this is like the dew of, like drops of dew. So very quickly it evaporates, very quickly it's gone. We know many cases of people who started with incredible wealth, or they generated themselves wealth, and then due to the turn of the circumstances, the turn of the market, they've lost everything. On the other hand, we know a lot of people who started poor, but due to the change of the economy, they were lifted out of poverty and they accumulated a lot of wealth. So this thing about wealth is something which changes very, very quickly. So the other thing in terms of impermanence to keep in mind is, of course, death. So death happens when we finally breathe out one last breath, and then we do not breathe in again. The Buddha has taught about those things. The Buddha has said, first there is birth, then there is aging, then there is sickness, and finally there is death. As Buddhists, we should definitely engage and practice those things. All it takes for death to occur is for the breath to leave the body. And from that point, consciousness is separated from the body. What's left behind is a corpse. It's a different case, of course, if you enter Thupten, in which case the consciousness remains in the body for a short period, a few days, 2-3 days, and so forth. But for the generally for the average person, once the breath leaves the body, that's it. That's death. If we look at the body is described to be a combination of various elements. So we find the combination of earth, of water, of fire, wind, space, and consciousness in the body. So the earth element is represented by all the solid parts of the body, such as, for example, the bones or the flesh and so forth. The water is represented by all the liquids in the body. The fire is represented by the heat in different parts of the body. The wind refers to the breath. Space is represented by cavities or empty hollow spaces within the body. And finally, we also have consciousness. In the course of the day, to the period of 24 hours, we have 21,600 breaths. So it is very important to focus on the breath and also try to recognize, okay, if this is the total number of breaths I have in a period of 24 hours, how many breaths do I have in the course of an hour? Or how many breaths I have in the course of a minute, let's say. So it is important to look at that because we want to see how many breaths we spend under the influence of anger, attachment, pride, ignorance, and so forth. How many breaths do we spend in this way? And how do those strong afflictions actually affect our breathing pattern? And then on the other hand, how many breaths do we spend, let's say, for the sake of health and maintaining a good health, like exercising for a good health? It is important to understand that actually the body is the physical basis for our consciousness. So whatever affects the body and the breathing will affect our consciousness as well. So Master Nagarjuna has actually talked about the person. He says the person is the combination of the 6 elements, yet it is not, the person is not earth, the person is not water, the person is not wind, is not fire, and so forth. Yet what person is there other than these? This particular verse is a verse that helps us clarify the meaning of emptiness. When we think about the person, when we think about myself, we have this notion of something which is very solid, very concrete. And when that notion of a solid I arises, it's very important to investigate. Where is this solid me that I am perceiving? Start, first of all, by examining the external part of the body. Like, is this solid me in the arms? Is it the legs? Is it the head? And so on and so forth. And then come inside the body. So is this solid I that I'm perceiving any of my organs, such as the heart? Is the heart the self? Is the liver the self? Is the lungs the self? And so on. So this particular verse is a verse that helps us, we can use it as a basis for meditating on emptiness, to clarify the view and understand that the person is something which is merely imputed upon all those things. So Geshe actually has found a very nice commentary on the text that the Lam Rim, the lines of experience, and he was saying, when you look at the Tibetan text does not have any chapters, outlines, things like that. It's just like it's just flow from beginning to end. And Geshe was saying, up to now, I have been discussing the material, commenting on the material in the way that we do, just as in the general way that we do when we recite it. However, Geshe said he recently received this very, very useful commentary that breaks down the text into chapters and outlines, which is very useful. It is composed by, the author is Ronda Losang Namtse Gyatso. Namtse Gyatso. Yeah, he's a great scholar. So Geshe is very happy to have the commentary. Yes. Okay. So it is very important to begin here with this, go back into our text. But Geshe said, you notice that we spent quite a lot of time in introduction, in preliminaries. So this initial explanation, the first part of the class, is very important. And whatever you hear in this introduction, in those preliminaries, are necessarily, absolutely things that we need within the Lam Rim. So, for example, we talked about faith today. If you are going to engage in any practice or study of the Lam Rim, certainly you will need faith in those things. We talked about the need to oppose the 8 worldly concerns and so forth. We talked about the importance of contemplating death and impermanence. So definitely these are very useful things. Okay, so we're about now to go back into the actual text, the explanation of our text. We are on verse number 8. Verse number 8 talks about the 4 greatness of the Lam Rim. So this, the subheading, if you want, or the outline, is how it possesses the 4 types of greatness. We say that the Lam Rim Chenmo, and especially all the other Lam Rim texts actually, possess 3 features and 4 types of greatness. So if we read again from verse number 8, it enumerates those 4 types of greatness. It says it helps you see all teachings as free of contradiction. It helps all scriptures dawn on you as personal instructions. It helps you easily discover the enlightened intention of the conquerors, and it helps protect you from the abyss of great negative deeds. So the first greatness is the greatness that it helps you see all the teachings without contradiction. We mentioned in our last class that when we talk about teachings, we talk about transmitted teachings and realized teachings. When we use this term transmitted teachings, we talk about teachings spoken by the Buddha. So transmitted here indicates sound, speech, right? So you can say it is the speech of the Buddha, the transmitted teachings, and we refer to the 84,000 bundles of teachings. We refer to the Prajnaparamita text, and then other great texts that were composed by Indian scholars, Tibetan scholars, Chinese scholars, Korean scholars, and so forth. So all of this constitutes what is known as the transmitted teachings. So in terms of translating all of those things into Tibetan, in Tibet, it was systematized as the Kangyur and the Tengyur. The Kangyur means the collection of speech, and it refers to the speech of the Buddha. In Tibetan, this constitutes a bit over 100 volumes. And then we have the Tengyur. The Tengyur is actually a collection of treatises. Those treatises are commentaries to the actual words of the Buddha. And translated into Tibetan, they make up a bit over 200 volumes. So altogether, Kangyur and Tengyur, we're talking about more than 300 volumes. So it is important to have the Tengyur as well, which is the commentaries, because as we say, for future disciples, if you take away bodhisattvas have special intelligence and they can directly see the meaning, they can directly see the Buddha and so forth. They're a special case. But for the ordinary future disciples, it is important to have the commentaries because they explain, they make it easy for you to access the meaning of the Buddha, of the speech of the Buddha. Now, when we use this expression, the speech of the Buddha, okay, so this again is very interesting because we have different types of speech of the Buddha. We have a speech that is directly spoken, uttered by the Buddha. We have speech that is inspired through the blessing of the Buddha. And we have speech that is comes as a confirmation from the Buddha. So, for example, in the Heart Sutra, we see that the majority of the sutra is a dialogue between the two bodhisattvas that is inspired. It comes in through the blessing of the Buddha. Right, so that's what the conversation is there in the Heart Sutra, but it's considered to be the speech of the Buddha. All right, so we have, as we say, the speech of the Buddha. And it's important to understand that the Buddha has taught many things. So all those sutras that the Buddha has taught, definitely he has taught sutras of the three vehicles. He has taught the Hinayana vehicle. And there are a lot of followers of the Hinayana who actually criticize Mahayana Sutra or Mahayana texts, saying that these were not words or teachings of the Buddha, but rather there were things that were composed later on, they were fabricated or composed later on by great Indian scholars. We must know this criticism, we must know this position. We are followers of the Mahayana, we follow the Mahayana sutras, we have great faith and respect for them. So if someone comes along and says, I don't accept that this is the speech of the Buddha, the teaching of the Buddha, we should be able to understand where this debate is coming from and how to give a response, right? So, for example, all these texts, such as the three mothers, the three prajna paramitas, extensive, middle, and short length, the text on bodhicitta, the text on great compassion, the texts that talk about the Mahayana paths, the Mahayana grounds, and so forth, all of those, we have to understand why we say that they are the speech of the Buddha and why they, the Hinayana followers, doubt this. They don't accept this. Okay. So we're talking here about the first greatness of the Lam Rim. It says you will be able to see that all the teachings of the Buddha are free of contradiction. So as we say, within the Lam Rim, we recognize that the Lam Rim includes all the crucial points of the 84 bundles of teachings of the Buddha and the Prajnaparamita text, and we do not see any contradiction there. It's very interesting talking about what is the speech of the Buddha and what is not when we talk about the great text. There is a text called the Ornament of Realization. So some might say this is classified as a treatise. So it is classified as the speech of the Buddha. It's a commentary to the speech of the Buddha. So some people say, no, it's not the speech of the Buddha because it was given by Protector Maitreya. It was not given by Buddha Shakyamuni. So if it is given by Maitreya, it cannot be the speech of the Buddha. However, the way we explain this is that in this, it was the Buddha, ultimately it is the Buddha who utters this word, but they are spoken and revealed through Master Maitreya. Okay, so the Buddha has taught many sutras, and being an omniscient being, the Buddha always taught in whichever way would be most appropriate and most beneficial for the specific individuals in the audience. So for those who needed to hear about impermanence, he taught impermanence. He emphasized impermanence. For those who needed to hear about selflessness, he talked about selflessness. For those who needed to hear about the true self, he talked about the self. For those who needed to hear that there are three vehicles, he taught that there are three vehicles. But for those who needed to hear that there is one final vehicle, he talked about the final vehicle. There is no contradiction, all this, because he's giving a teaching according to the occasion, and that teaching is what is the most beneficial to guide that individual along the path. So at that particular time, that particular individual was at that level that they needed to hear that instruction. And this was the instruction that the Buddha gave at that particular time and place and audience, specifically tailored for their needs. All right. From our side, we cannot turn ahead and say, I would not practice this. So, for example, in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, and he taught the 16 aspects, such as impermanence and so forth. These are considered to be sutras and teachings of the Hinayana vehicle. So here we come as Mahayana practitioners. It would be completely wrong to say, I will not engage the Hinayana sutras. I will not engage the teachings of the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, such as impermanence and so forth. So we need to engage those things, although they are not our main practice. So the first greatness of the Lam Rim is the greatness that you will be able to see all the teachings without contradiction. The word teachings here refers to the transmitted teachings. So as we say, we have this presentation of the three vehicles, and we also have the presentation that there is only one final vehicle. When you hear that, you might say there is contradiction. It cannot be both three or one. But we explain this, but we're saying the presentation of the three vehicles is the intention of the sutra, not the intention of the Buddha. The presentation of one final vehicle is the intention of the Buddha. So you will be able to see all teachings without contradiction. The second greatness is, says, all scriptures. Actually, it's all okay, all scriptures dawn on you as personal instruction. Okay, so it means that all the teachings of the Buddha, all the scriptures that have come from the Buddha, all the scriptures of the great Indian scholars, and all the great text will appear to you as personal instruction. So great texts such as the ornament, for example, will appear to you as personal instruction. By relying on the Lam Rim composed by Je Rinpoche, the Prajnaparamita text, the meaning of the Prajnaparamita will arise to our mind as personal instruction. The meaning of the ornament will arise in our mind as personal instruction. And by relying on this Lam Rim, that gives us access to those very difficult, classical, extensive texts, we have the opportunity to perform analytical and placement meditation to all these subjects, starting from the proper way to rely on the Guru all the way to developing special insight and reaching the resultant state of Buddhahood. So this is how everything appears as a personal instruction. Okay, if there are any questions, we can take questions now. Okay, just be brave, just ask what you want to ask. I can hardly hear you.
Oh, sorry. Is this better?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, well, I frequent, I started off as going to Theravada Hinayana Dharma practice. So it's many times they, like Geshe said, criticize. So they always say that this is the wrong way, wrong teaching. So this is today's lesson is very enlightening for me. So they say that the scriptures are not original. The many people there, yeah, the scholars there. No, the people there, yeah. So, so that's I really appreciate that this has been enlightening for me. Thank you very much.
That's good.
Okay lah.
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you,
Okay.
Geshe, for your teaching. It was mentioned earlier that in the class today that there is Kanyu teachings has 100 plus teachings, and Tanyo teachings has 200 plus volumes. This is the first time I'm hearing these two teachings, and I would like to find out, do we need to pursue in depth into understanding what these teachings are? First question. Because at the moment, I'm concentrating on Lam Rim, and I want to focus on Lam Rim. So do I need to continue to go and look for what is Kanyu teachings and Kanyu teachings?
Well, yeah, it is true. When we talk about the Kangyur and the Tengyur, which is the collection of teachings, we spoke about how many volumes we have translated into Tibetan. But actually, we have Kangyur and Tengyur collection in China, for example, which is a bit more extensive. Because you have to understand that the teachings that were recorded in India, from India first they went to China. So there was a great translation effort, right? So we have the Kangyur and Tengyur in Chinese. From there they went to Mongolia. From Mongolia they went into Tibet. And actually the number of texts translated into Tibet is slightly shorter than what exists in the collection of the Chinese translation. So yes, all of these are teachings that we must try to put into practice. We keep saying that the Buddha gave 84,000 bundles of teachings. Okay, and then of course these are systematized in different collections. So often in the monastery, when you come into the Gompa, you will see there will be volumes of texts that are stacked, right, to the right and the left of the altar. So these are all the volumes of the Kangyur and the Tengyur. And many times there is the comment is made that, you know how when we come into the main Gompa, we prostrate. So we prostrate to the statues, but we prostrate to the texts that are piled up there. So the comment is that, you know, the Kangyur and the Tengyur, these are teachings. They're not just for putting them in the altar, forgetting about them and just prostrating. These are things that we really need to put into practice. However, to be realistic, first you would have to find an exceptionally trained teacher to be able to teach you the whole Kangyur and Tengyur, like every subject. And then from your side, it will take a huge amount of effort and time to engage all the teachings of the Buddha. So realistically, we are limited. We cannot do that. We should aspire. We should think, I will engage all the teachings, but practically we can't. But you see here the great benefit of the Lam Rim, either Lam Rim Chenmo, or if we're talking about the Lamb to the Path of Master Atisha. It is only a few pages long, but we say that it includes all the essential points of all the teachings of the Buddha. So all the points of the personal paramita text, the personal paramita text go on for thousands of pages. So the condensed meaning of that is within the Lam Rim. So definitely we want to focus on the Lam Rim. The Lam Rim will give us all the instruction for how to subdue, how to tame the mind. It will tell us how to act in a way to benefit others, how to develop the mind of bodhicitta, how to set our motivation, a good intention every single day, how to conduct ourselves through the course of the day, all the way, all those basic and important practices, all the way up to what to do in order to reach the state of enlightenment. So you can see here, you know, the greatness of the Lam Rim. Okay, so remember we said that in the course of 24 hours, we take 21,600 breaths. So you can, that's a bit of homework for you, you can divide 21,600 by however many seconds we have in 24-hour period and find how many breaths we have in a second. Okay, now okay, that's important. It's going to be continued in our next class. We said that the teachings from India, they spread to China. So there was this great Bodhisattva, Dimalikirti. he composed a sutra. He talked about a sutra. It's a sutra. It takes about emptiness that became very popular in amongst Buddhists in China and Japan. And we're going to talk about it in our next class. Okay.
Geshe, for your teaching. Geshe, I wanted to get Geshe's advice on the practice. I won't say on practice, on how to, or should I say how to strengthen faith? Because personally, I felt that faith is very, very important, especially in Tibetan Buddhism or Vajrayana path. It hit me before when this faith is not strong enough. It impacted the practice. I just would like to get some advice on how to strengthen or what can we do. Thank you, Geshe.
So, yes, faith is very important, and the way to strengthen your faith is to continue with your practice, but keep thinking, analyzing about the reason of things, all right? So, as I say, the Buddha has taught various things, but he taught things with a reason, for a reason. Okay, so just consider your situation. Here you are, you're born as a human, you have a few privileges. You have a good body, healthy body, good mind. You have a precious human rebirth. You come to drop a limb. You have interest in the Dharma. Okay, so you have to ask a question, where did those things come from? The things that I have right now in this life must have come from whatever karma and whatever merit I accumulated in my previous life. So in my previous life, I must have practiced Dharma, right? So I must have had some faith in the Dharma. Keep thinking about this, analyze this. Definitely, as Buddhists, we believe that we came to this world from a previous life, and from this life, we will go into the next life. We do not believe that there is a God creator. We believe that, we create the karma and we go from one life to the next continuously. There are many other let's say religious systems or philosophical systems that believe that there is God creator. And a lot of the Geshes who go into the West, they actually have quite interesting conversations about these issues. So Geshe was saying another Geshe who went to the West, he met this Muslim. And mostly the Muslims believe that there is a God creator, right? But this one said, I believe in past lives. And the Geshe asked him, why? Why do you say that? He said, because in this life, I have memories of many places that I have not visited in this life. And therefore, these memories must come from the previous lives. So anyway, so he was an exception, someone who believed in the past and future lives. Now, as we say, our consciousness came from a past life. The past, it came to the present life. And from this present life, when this life finishes, we do not become non-existent. We will take another rebirth. When we take another rebirth, there are only basically two ways to go. Either we go down to the bad migrations, or we go up to a good migration. So a good migration will be a migration as a god or a human. And the way that we establish these migrations, as the Buddha has said, is by practicing virtue, accumulating merit, and working hard on our purification. All right, so keep thinking along these lines. And Geshe says, I think you will definitely find that your mind will change. It will have an effect on your mind. Now, when we do our dedication, in Danten Lagema, the verse of dedication says, through whatever virtue I and others have created in this way, I dedicate this in the way that will bring the most benefit to the teachings and sentient beings, and particularly for the teachings of Losang Tragpa to spread and remain in this world. So when it says through whatever virtue I and others have done. So in this world, in this earth, we have many Dharma practitioners. So whatever virtue they have created, and along with the virtue that we have created through our practice, we gather all this together. So virtue that was created in our past lives, in the present life, and virtue that we will create in the future. What do we dedicate towards? We dedicate towards the teachings, the Buddha's teachings, to spread and remain for a very long time. And also we dedicate all over the world, and also we dedicate for whatever can be of benefit and happiness, bring benefit and happiness to sentient beings. It is quite important. I mean, if we, even these days, there is so much war happening around, so to dedicate towards the happiness and well-being of all sentient beings, it's important. And particularly, especially since we are followers of the Gelug tradition, it says, may the teachings of Je Tsongkhapa, Lam Tsongkhapa, remain in this world for a very long time. So we keep mentioning about the Lamrim Chenmo and all the works of Lam Tsongkhapa. May we dedicate that these works remain for a very long time. Yeah. So when it comes to the dedication prayer, don't just let it be just mere words from the mouth. It should be from the heart, dedication from the heart.